Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I was lucky enough to sit down and chat with the president of television for the Jim Henson Company, Halle Stanford. She was also the executive producer on the new Netflix series, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. We chat about everything we love about the movie, the new series, puppets, all of it. It's a great chat that I was so excited to get to have, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, Les.
Hi, Halle. Thanks so much for making time today. I'm doing great. I'm so excited to get to talk to you.
I'm excited to get to talk to you.
Yeah, 2 years into knowing Javi, and it's become abundantly clear that I will never fully repay that guy.
Aw, he's the best. He really is the best.
Yeah.
I'm indebted to him as well, honestly. I've had a lot of fun too. I don't know if he told you, like he and I taught a world building class together. And he and I, we're both such nerds. We're very similar. We're a very similar type of person and creative. And when we found out that people had to pay extra to come to our session, we had no idea. We were just asked to do it, right? Mm-hmm. We were like, sure. But we were like, wait, what? People pay extra? We suddenly became like Professor Marswatch and Professor Stanford. We took that job so seriously. It was amazing.
That's
so
great.
Fun.
That's great.
And we sold it out, too. So we were like, yeah, did it. Gave them what they deserve.
So your current title is President of Television for Henson Company. Did I get that correct?
That is correct. I am the President of Television for the Jim Henson Company. I'm also the executive producer on all of our television series as well. So it's twofold. I am an executive, sort of managing the slate and the strategy of the television department. And that's for preschool all the way up through prime time. So, 2 to 200, that's who I take care of. And then as an executive producer, I am overseeing the productions as well from beginning to end. And really, I would even say the executive producer title extends for myself into the franchise of each production we do. So even for a show like Dinosaur Train, let's say, I'm still very heavily involved in how we do, let's say educational outreach, or if we're going to do a podcast, or if we're going to do licensing. I'm still pulled in to make sure that the franchise is being handled creatively and honoring what we've done in production. So that's something we do that's unique at Henson.
And you came on board in 93, is that right?
Yes, it is. I was 10 years old, and no, I'm just kidding. So when I came over to the Jim Henson Company, I came over as a creative assistant. And I worked for Alex Rockwell, who is to this day still my mentor, and I love her so much. She is executive producing many things for our company, of which one of our most popular shows, which is also on Netflix, called Word Party, in the preschool slate. And Alex actually also started as Jim Henson's creative assistant.
Oh, wow.
So when I started to work for Alex, I actually was raised in the tradition of the Jim Henson creative process. So I was very lucky to have gotten that type of mentoring. So it's sort of like Jim was flowing through Alex, and of course all of her great teachings as well.
At the time, did you realize that was a little bit of a unique process? Was there a moment professionally later where you worked with other people and went, y'all don't do it this way? Weird.
Oh, 100%. In fact, I feel like, that's one of the reasons I've stayed here so long, is that I love the creative culture of Henson, and I've gotten to build onto it and add to it, of course. But when I did leave the company for about 3 years. I started my own company called Seven Crow Stories. I went out and produced for all kinds of companies, everything from Disney Channel to Cartoon Network to Warner Brothers, and definitely brought a sort of nurturing of the artist to every place that I went that felt very unique, as well as one of the things we do, and it's kind of a fun thing that I can bring back to the conversation about Dark Crystal, is just that we call them charrettes, creative brainstormings, how we approach a problem together creatively. I definitely brought that out into the community. I'd never seen anything like it, and I think that I feel like I've inspired a lot of companies in that respect to start doing that process. It's fun for me to hear later certain companies like DHX. I did a show with them called Doozers. It was fun to hear later that they're like, oh, yeah, now we do our creative brainstormings, our kickoff meetings with the entire team at the very beginning of a production. And that's something that I do think is very unique to Henson. Do you want me to break that down a little bit more for you, what that process looks like?
I would absolutely love that.
Okay, cool. I'll talk about it with Dark Crystal, but I'll talk about it also maybe with some of our other shows. So like Sid the Science Kid, when we initially do a kickoff charrette, what we do is not only it's not just a writer's room, and I know you've been talking to the amazing writers on the Dark Crystal. It's not just a writer's room. It's a little bit different. What we do is we sit down with a group that so on Sid, for example, we sat down with scientists. We sat down with preschool directors. We sat down with moms in the same room, right? The writers, the artists, and the show creators. And we sit down and we talk about, okay, what do we want the show to be about, right? What's the show about? What is our audience looking for from a show like this? And then how can we translate that back to story, to character? And so it's just this kind of organic, fluid process that by the end of the charrette, we're going to know, like, okay, this is what our show, this is the messaging, the takeaway that we wanted kids and moms and teachers to take away from the show. But then the writers that are sitting there can also get a lot of ideas for story and for character that they may not have gotten if they were just like searching on the internet, or if they were just, having maybe like a 2-hour conversation with just a curriculum advisor. So it's this kind of wonderful process where everybody gets something out of it, but the show, the one thing that gets the most out of it is the show, right? Mm-hmm. So on the Dark Crystal, we definitely did that on Age of Resistance, same type of scenario. But in this case, not necessarily educational advisors, although I always feel like I'm speaking for the kids and speaking for the messaging of the show. But you had the writers, you had Louis Leterrier as the director, you had the Creature Shop, you had Brian Froud. We probably pulled in our marketing group, our licensing group. Like, what would they love it if we could, put our hopes and dreams, their hopes and dreams into the show, if we could build in. And I'm sure you can imagine licensing would be like, please, fizz gigs. Please don't forget the fizz gigs. And we did not forget the fizz
No, you
gigs.
did not.
And even before Age of Resistance, and I'm not sure if anybody talked about this, and maybe they didn't because none of our writers were there, before we even developed Age of Resistance, a few years beforehand, when we were developing it as an animated series, we had what Lisa and I we lovingly call the Great Creative Conjunction, where we did this very type of charrette, where we brought together Brian Froud, myself, Lisa. Actually, Ted Biaselli was a part of that at the time. We brought in these uber fans. We brought in Boom Comics. We brought in YA Publishing. And we sat around and we discussed, okay, what does Thrall look like before the movie? And we started to break out, like, what were the Gelflings like? That's where we came up with the 7 clans and the names and the types, and let's make them indigenous, right? Let's make them, each one is inspired by the environment they live in, and what does that look like? We talked a lot about the new Skeksis. And then one of my favorite moments of all that happened in that charrette is one of the Uber fans said they had brought pictures of the Wall of Destiny, and they're like, it's kind of interesting. If you look at the Wall of Destiny, this character in the center of it is a woman who looks like the king or queen. And it blew our mind. We were like, wow, what if we made this a matriarchal culture? Yeah, and let's have an Almadra. And that's when we started coming up with the matriarchal culture of the Gelfling, and completely broke that out in that particular session. So out of that charrette, we had these building blocks for the series, but not only the series, for the YA books that Joe Lee wrote, for the Boom Comics graphic novels that they spun off, and then just for ourselves in consumer products and licensing. And then ultimately, hooray, for Age of Resistance. And we were able to take, all of that type of creativity that had been done before and then apply it to the show, and then offer it up to the writers to say, here you go. There's some building blocks. Go for it. Take it even further. So that's an example of something that, sort of like was passed down a long time ago from Jim Henson. He dream fasted with us, Les, across time and space.
That's great, and it would warm my heart if that's how all of this works. I'm fine with that. We're just going to let that be.
Yeah.
I'm often baffled nowadays that so many things can be a controversy or push buttons on people.
Right.
But I loved that Dark Crystal deals with things that really shouldn't be hot button topics. It's a fantasy show, and it's a matriarchal culture, and it's not, yelling names at anybody. But I love that Dark Crystal does what I like fantasy to do, which is give a little bit of sugar to help the medicine go down. And I feel like genre productions often let me see themes that are more upfront than they would necessarily get to be in other programming. I feel like Twilight Zone would not have gotten to be quite as on the nose sometimes if it had been This Is Us, Yeah.
I mean, it's there's a couple of things I want to say about the first being like, I love fantasy so much because it's so true, right? The stories are so true. And, you could say, for a child, unicorns aren't real. They're so true and real to kids. They know that intellectually. They're like, yeah, I get it. There's not a unicorn running around the world. It doesn't make it less true for a child. So fantasy and the stories we're telling don't make it less true, and they deepen the understanding of your world and your own destiny within that world in a way that no other story can. Yeah. So the exciting thing about Dark Crystal coming out now is that there are topics that are so on the nose with ourselves, but also with Gen Zers. I mean, like, I make Lisa Henson laugh whenever I call our Gelfling Gen G, because I'm like, yeah, they're the total, like, Gen Z of Thra, because they want to do something when they want to make a difference. So, one of them, it's very environmental, right? Deet, she's like, there's a darkening in our world. Well, kids can take a look at that right now, people, and see that in our own world, right? You don't have to hit it over the head. It exists, and we're seeing Deet do something about it. Brea is questioning those in authority and decisions that they're making, and she's trying to sort of understand the politics of the world. And when did this happen? Oh my gosh, you can totally see that again, just right now at this very moment in time, being the same type of topics that people all over the world, young people especially, are struggling with. And then, of course, Rian seeing, sort of, inhumanity towards humanity and the abuse that others can do to those that are different and weaker. I mean, it's just like all these topics are so hot right now. Have they always been hot? Yes, but right now it just seems like the universe was conspiring for this particular fantasy tale to come out right now. So was it overtly political? Well, when we began thinking about the prequel, it was still, it was 14 years ago. All these issues were still happening. They've just all come to a head right now. So I'm hoping so much that Age of Resistance is like this roadmap, this fantasy roadmap for, audiences to get inspired and take action.
Yeah. For me, seeing a character like Chamberlain make these insidious arguments and mess with the notion of truth and spread rumors and do all these things, it gives me an opportunity to see characters work against that and try to repair that damage, which is really what I want messaging wise, not for kids, but for me.
Yeah, 100%. Well, like it's, and I say kids just because they're younger people, the Gelfling, but it should relate to all of us right now and inspire all of us. Oh, I know. Isn't that Chamberlain speech incredible in the pilot, where it's just like, I plant stories, I plant truth, and there's nothing Gelfling can do about it. I actually get teary every time I hear it, because you just are like, yeah, you go get him, Gelfling. You go get him, Rian.
Yeah, when he's speaking to Rian in the chariot, and like, no, I don't want to murder you. I want you to speak out against what you said earlier. And the duplicity of it and the smoothness, it's just it makes my skin crawl as an adult, and it awakens something in me of like, oh God, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what I would do faced with that. And it locks me to like, well, now I have to see what this puppet does so that I can learn how to deal with this in real life.
Yeah, and also you can see Rhiannon's conflicted in that moment. He doesn't either. Like, it's not like he's like, yeah, I'll get out right now. He's like, oh.
I think that's what's scary is that you can see it work.
Because those in power are manipulative, and they can twist those stories and gaslight you, and you need that moment to breathe and to figure it out. But following your heart in action is, of course, the messaging of the series. But yes, those moments, I feel like Rhiannon had a really true response in that moment that felt very complex, and that's why I think this is such an important story too. It's very sophisticated, right? Our writers did such an incredible job. It's not just at a very young level. It's at a very high level of storytelling.
Well, and that sophistication, I had to thank Javi for the Crystal Singers and the scene where Tavra walks forward, and you think it's her, and then like, no, we are not. We are the Ascendancy. Watching baby spiders pour out of someone and overtake an army is Wrath of Khan creepy to me. Like I told him, it's like you made SETI eels out of puppets, man. You creeping me out. And then to not 2 episodes later have those have the creepy character turn and be on my side. And by the end of it, I'm thrilled when there's the hug with the Aratham.
Isn't it great? I mean, I love that too. And it really, and one of the things I love about the Aratham too is because they are not of the same species, so you can kind of dismiss them as like, yeah, it's like, stormtroopers. We're just going to blow them away. They're faceless. And then you give them spirit, and you suddenly start to empathize with them. Like, oh, they were tricked too.
Yeah.
And then you start to, you hear the references to the Spitter Wars in the show, and you think, oh wait, did the Skeksis pit the creatures of Thra against one another? Uh-oh.
Yes.
And so you realize there's this even greater healing that's going on, not just between the Gelfling, but between the creatures of Thra.
Yeah.
And I think that's very powerful, because to me that's a message right now that in our own world, like, yeah, it's about us all coming together as Earthlings, but Earthlings also include animals, right? So these are some really powerful messages that we're hoping, fingers crossed, will transcend.
I know when I watched it as a kid, Dark Crystal, I mean, for a lot of us, just there was something about the tone of it, and it stuck like a burr in a lot of our childhoods. It was just never forgotten. And I know for me, weirdly, it was the structuring of seeing the Urskeks at the very end. I knew that the Skeksis were bad, and there was an immediate, like, well, obviously you don't trust them. They look like psychopaths, cloaked in bureaucracy. And I recognize as an adult now, I love the dichotomy of the Urus not actually being any more helpful. They're not particularly useful. The Mystics are I mean, clearly nobody told Jin anything about any of this in his entire life. They could have been teaching him about all of this. They're not particularly helpful either, but you knew you'd always get a hug from them. You knew it would always be comforting. The Urskeks, as a kid, I recognized that I didn't know which way they'd break on a given situation, and it terrified me. And so the scariest thing in the entire movie to me was the resolution at the end. And then they vanish. Like, they're clearly more powerful than we'd realized. And yeah, I came away from the movie going, no, I'm more disturbed by the happy ending. And
that they came together. You're like, where's the peaceful, loving mystics?
And that
oh no.
Yeah, realizing that made Dark Crystal one of the more formative stories for me as a kid, because it taught me something inherent about human nature, that everybody has both sides, and you don't have all good people and all bad people. It would be much easier if you did. Was there
or that it's great, like just
yes.
Well, no, I mean, I think the Skeksis are bad. I was going to say, just because you do bad things doesn't make you a bad person. Well, the Skeksis
they're pretty bad.
But they kind of, like, they go against that that idea. But, no, I totally hear you, and those themes still exist. You can see with the Heretic and Wanderer that choices are made that are very different from their brother and sister mystics and Skeksis. So yeah, you still sort of we're still playing with that, For me as a child, I mean, obviously I was such an uber fan that I wanted to develop a prequel series. So, you got me on, like, I was completely convinced about the Dark Crystal being the greatest story of all time in my childhood. It's funny, when I was a child, I wasn't really scared of the Skeksis because my dad died when I was young. So I was like, I see darkness everywhere. I was like, yeah, I got those. I know those guys. I love them. I thought they were hilarious, and I agree with you. I thought the Mystics, I'm like, why are they so slow? Like, why are they taking so long to get there? But I love the Gelfling. Like, the Gelfling are who, for me, really changed sort of the way I walked in the world, because I thought, wait, you can be little in the world that's filled with, like, monsters and darkness, and you feel kind of sad, that you don't really know that parent or where you're from, but you can heal. I was in. Like, I love that story, and I feel like maybe a lot of kids will say this as well, but I feel like it really helped heal something in me as I started to, walk in the world again, truly.
In the new series, there's a moment in the first episode where the camera is low and like 3 landstriders just run over the top of it. And it took my breath away, and I was hooked. It looked as good as I remember the movie looking from my childhood.
Les, I love that you say about that moment. You want to know why? Because that was a moment for me, too, as a producer, when we got to see that shot. I remember that moment thinking, I cannot believe this. This is unbelievable. I'm so excited.
It looks so good.
I cannot wait for everybody to see this moment with their first shot of the landstriders. I had that same reaction, and the first time I saw it as well, and every time I see it, of course. But I'm so glad to hear that you had the same reaction at that moment too.
That and I had to ask the writers about the landstrider dung, if anyone even considered that someone would have to make that and then make it actually.
What did they say?
And then just yep, that was a Wednesday.
That's hilarious. And then it's darkened. We all laugh about that. Darkened dung. That's what we laughed at around the couch with my kids. We were like, that's hilarious.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today about Dark Crystal and your career and everything.
I'm so excited that you were such an Uber fan. You and I had a good chuckle over the month of August. And now it's Skektember.
Yes.
So I hope in Skektember that everybody, checks it out and watches it. And definitely if they have kids, to sit around the couch and have a good time watching it together. Yes, absolutely. But I don't have kids and have no excuse. It was absolutely wonderful. You don't need to have kids. But if you do, I'm like, this is the perfect one to get nostalgic and nerdy and have an adventure together. And hopefully not 30 years before the next visual iteration of it. I hope not. I hope it's very soon. And we'll keep growing it, Mm-hmm. We'll keep growing it. Whether it's series or more books and graphic novels and fingers crossed movies and spin-offs and all of that, we're just getting started. Yes. Well, thank you so much, and have an absolutely great rest of your day. Thanks, Les.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TVDudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TV Dudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.